Hello, everybody. Welcome to our spoiler review of Spider-Man Far From Home. Our non-spoiler review ran last week before the movie hit theaters, but it's out now. If you're watching this, that means you are about to get big time spoiled on a movie that is almost essentially completely chock full of spoilers.
Yeah.
I'm here with Eric Goldman, the managing editor of fandom.com. Hello, Eric.
Hello there. I'm excited to talk about this movie, finally.
Yes, yeah. Roth and I did the review.
Yeah.
But we haven't heard from you yet. Just before we jump into spoilers real quick, just so people can click off if you have... seriously, we're going to jump right into spoilers in a second.
Right.
What did you think briefly about the movie?
I really dug it. I guess I will say my only caveat is I did like Homecoming a little more, but I loved Homecoming. I've actually discovered Homecoming has kind of split people a little more than I thought. But this one, I thought the first half is good, but maybe the humor is a little more hit or miss. Like, there was some jokes that didn't quite land for me, but some were great. But the second half is so good, is so strong for both spoiler reasons, but just overall, I think just the pace, the tone is so great. So yeah, I really dug it, and certainly the way it ended, which we're going to get into with our huge spoilers in a second, was amazing. I don't mean the pun, but it was a really great way to end this movie, and has me very excited for what's next, which I know the MCU is good at in general, but this one I think in a sort of extra special way. It really set the stage for stuff. So very positive thoughts on this movie.
All right, well then we're jumping into spoilers because we have to start at the ending.
Yeah, we have to.
Here we go. Get ready. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
J. Jonah Jameson is back. And not only is J. Jonah Jameson back, J.K. Simmons is back as J. Jonah Jameson.
We got everything we wanted.
It's everything we wanted.
Right?
Usually, sometimes when something seems so obvious and they do it, it feels cheap.
Yeah.
But I've got to be honest, I was super excited to see him back in this role.
It was great. You know, I think they earned it by not doing it for so long. I mean, the character sat out an entire iteration of Spider-Man.
He did, yeah.
It's been, 12 years. It was 2007, I think, Spider-Man 3.
Something like that. Yeah, because there was no J. Jonah Jameson in the Andrew Garfield movie.
No J. Jonah Jameson. I think there was the Vegas reference to the Daily Bugle.
Yeah.
So he'd been gone for so long as a character that A, it was great to see him again, and B, I think it probably let Feige and the MCU, everyone behind it, feel more comfortable having it be J.K. Simmons again, because I'm sure they had back and forth on that. I did ask John Watts about it, and he said it was always going to be him in his mind. But yeah, I think the only comparison I can think of is Judi Dench as M, as far as like taking an actor playing the same role in a completely new iteration and putting them in there again.
Right, because James Bond, it's not like it's technically supposed to be the same guy, but
Casino Royale, it's like clearly like a hard reboot, right? It's like his origin story over
he's still
again.
There. Or
but
she's still
there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just felt so right. Like there was no, I don't know, I'm sure it was the same for you, but there was plenty of applause. I saw it at a fairly small press screening, and
ours was a theater full, and they were very, and I'm sure that the people were very excited about this.
Yeah. It was a very, very cool thing that, like you said, sometimes giving us what we want is exactly the right thing.
They've gone with the bald version of J.K. Simmons, which I don't mind so much.
I'm fine with that. I think that probably, again, I think in their mind maybe even helps distance it. You know, it's like it's still the guy you love playing the character, but we're gonna let him visually be different.
And I've got to be honest, he was always sort of a proto-fringe crazy internet type.
Sure.
I love that they've just made him that.
Yeah.
That he is for lack of a better word, the Alex Jones of he always has been.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I like that now technology sort of has caught up with reality in the sense that, like, I think an old kind of yellow journalism newspaper editor now would be a little, what are newspapers?
Right.
It makes, these people exist. J. Jonah Jamesons exist everywhere on the internet
They
now.
do, and now they have a bigger
that's
platform than ever. And I don't know if you played the Sony video game last year. Yeah, and it's like they kind of did that too with those voiceovers you'd get from him. So it just felt like a really natural way to reintroduce the character. It'd be very difficult to reintroduce him as a newspaper editor-in-chief that Peter would go to work for in this day and age, because while newspapers exist, obviously they struggle, and for Peter to even have that job would be like an extra hurdle for them to get past.
Yeah.
I think this was the right way to do it.
Well, let's talk about the consequences of that appearance, which is that I was honestly a little surprised that they have done this so early in this Spider-Man solo movies.
Right. It's weird because it's his fifth appearance, but his second solo movie.
Yeah, it's a little odd, but it would seem that this is the real world somehow catching up with the retro sensibilities of the comics, which is that Mysterio was like, I cast illusions, and it's always cheesy, but we live in a time of the deep fake, and the sense that like that makes perfect sense, that would be a skill set that would come in handy in this day and age.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the revelation apparently to the world of Spider-Man's secret identity. Now, I was surprised at the end of last movie when they revealed it to Aunt May so early.
Yeah.
Now it appears that we're going to be living in a world that knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. That is something that the movies have never dealt with.
They've never dealt with the big reveal. I mean, a lot of people have talked about the fact that the MCU has kind of almost completely avoided secret identities, right?
Right.
Most of the characters, that's not even an issue. I mean, that's what was so great about and refreshing about the end of the first Iron Man at the time was him just saying I'm Iron Man, but then it kind of became every character is just their identity known. Spider-Man's been the big exception to this rule, and they have not dealt with this. And in the comic books, this is kind of a big sort of thing that's happened other times, not just for Spider-Man. A lot of characters like, their identity revealed. What will they do if everyone knows who they are? Do they try to deny it?
Right.
It's certainly really cool to get it with the 1-2 punch of being framed for a crime he didn't commit.
Yeah, you know? It's kind of the Dark Knight ending in that it seems like the next movie is setting it up for a Spider-Man on the run.
Yeah, and it's also that's a very classic Spider-Man comics thing. I mean, that goes back to not only did Mysterio, I believe, frame him in his first appearance, but it happened a lot in short runs, and then it would happen like I remember when. I don't remember when because I wasn't alive when it first happened, but I've read it in reprints. It's George Stacy being killed in the comics and how Peter was wanted for that for like years of the not in comic book time, but in real life time. And I think it happened again with Gwen. It's like he was constantly wanted for crimes that his enemies had committed.
Yes.
And so that's actually really cool to see that brought into the movies as well.
So I think going forward, the question is with the Avengers, this was very much about the legacy of Tony Stark, literally directly deals. And I loved that moment on the plane with him playing I Love Led Zeppelin. But him sort of echoing Tony Stark with in Happy's eyes at least putting the suit together. But it seemed like they were going the direction that Spider-Man is going to inherit the mantle of at least being a key member of the Avengers, but now a little bit more difficult to do that if he is wanted for murder.
That's got to be put on pause. I mean, again, we don't know. They still haven't told us the Phase 4 plans.
Yeah.
So we don't know when we're going to see Spider-Man again, right? I mean, there's going to be a third movie coming, in Phase 4. Spider-Man, by the way, I just realized stands out as the only solo character to get 2 of his movies in one phase.
Yes.
Phase 3 had both Homecoming and Far From Home, technically.
Yeah.
But that the third Spider-Man movie's coming. But the way these movies work, I would assume that if we don't see him again directly, we could still see the hunt for him. Right. That could still be acknowledged in these other movies.
Well, and plus we know that Black Widow, we assume at least, is going to be either a prequel or some kind of an alternate type thing. Although the idea of a multiverse, which so many people thought that this movie would introduce, did not, and we'll get to that. But and then Doctor Strange. Who knows?
Mr. Strange is Aunt May called?
Mr. Strange, yes. The Eternals, if that is a movie that's coming up, again, that probably would not tie in very much with Spider-Man's story.
Shang-Chi, maybe?
But you're right. We don't know where they're going.
We don't know where we're going because they can still, I guess my bigger point is because I do think eventually there will be a movie called Avengers again, but that could be 3-4 years from now. And they could either wrap up what's happening with Spider-Man beforehand, or it could even tie into what's happening with Spider-Man.
When do you think we'll see Spider-Man again?
I mean, I just feel like, so there was an interesting article in Vanity Fair last year. I don't know if you saw or if you talked about how it's like, they said how Far From Home, Marvel Studios didn't want it coming out this year.
Right, because they didn't want to have to deal with marketing a movie before Endgame came out that would deal with after Endgame.
Right, but Sony, that's like where Sony ultimately, they still control the character overall, and so that was their move. So I would say, again, this was only 2 years since Homecoming, so I would guess sooner than later. I'd guess within 3 years tops, but just seeing the character again, I bet it's in the next 2 years. Like, I just feel like, again, he is their flagship character. Now more than ever with Iron Man off the table, it's like
Cap off the table.
It's like you want to keep Spider-Man relevant and in these movies. So we might. I don't think we're going to see him in a movie next year. I don't think Black Widow or Eternals can involve him. But somehow the year after, we don't know exactly what's going to come the year after, except Guardians 3, we assume.
Yeah.
But I think he'll pop up in something. Not Guardians 3, but something.
Well, as if that weren't enough. Like, I was leaving the movie, I'm like, okay, that's the big, and then this next one's going to be something cute, maybe a happy Aunt May moment or something. But no. They had another big reveal, which was that the Nick Fury and Maria Hill that we thought we were following the entire film were, in fact, Skrulls. Yeah. And not just any Skrulls, but Talos from the first film.
Yeah, his wife, whose name I'm forgetting. Mrs. Talos.
Yes, the Taloses.
The Taloses, yes.
Were, in fact, posing as Nick and Maria Hill.
Yeah.
We've talked about secret. This isn't quite a secret invasion in the fact that they were not sinister, nefarious agents, but there is talk of Kree sleeper cells, which I thought was odd that the two of them would be talking about Kree sleeper cells.
Yeah, that actually has a lot more context now. Yeah.
So we have set up the idea that there could be Skrulls posing as characters that we know and love
in
the MCU. I'm going to put my cards on the table. I'm not a fan of it. Just in general, this is a huge consequential thing, but I think I hate shape-shifting. I really do. I hate this idea of it's hard for me to invest in something if I'm worried that they're always going to pull the rug out from under me and be like, whoop, nope, never mind.
Yeah, I don't want them to do it all the time. And by the way, I don't need Secret Invasion as a story, but I think that they could still do some weird reflection of it. Like you said, it's like, yeah, there might be some Skrulls hidden among us, but they're not nefarious in this iteration, at least as far as we've seen.
Right.
It's a fun reveal. It on one hand, it feels like almost like just a silly fun reveal. It does raise questions of why did Nick Fury leave Earth? He's off with the Skrulls. Yeah. Presumably he got snapped back to life. Presumably that was still him at Tony's funeral. And then maybe he's like, I need some time away.
I need to relax.
Talos, will you switch places with me?
Well, it's interesting because visually they drew some parallels to how they had represented Tahiti. And with Agent Coulson.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like this idea, but of being reprogrammed, but that it seems like he was just on vacation.
Yeah. It was interesting. I mean, it's like, again, it's funny. I was noting that it's like, Talos actually, this is the first time we're seeing Talos since 1995, and it's 2023 now in the MCU because it's 5 years after Infinity War. So we still don't know a lot about what he's been up to this whole time. Presumably, Captain Marvel was off helping them find a new home. How successful were they? They seemed in good spirits, so we can guess things didn't go horribly. So it raises some questions, but not as monumental as the Jonah one, I think, on a personal level. I mean, I guess, and I know you were talking about this a little earlier, it's the thing about these post-credit scenes in this movie are that, especially that first one, I don't think we've ever seen one quite like this, in that it maybe Thor the Dark World, oddly, with the one where he comes back to Jane, in that it literally is the ending of the movie. Like, if you leave, other times when you leave, you're like, oh, you're missing something cool.
Right.
But this time, if you leave before that J. Jonah Jameson
you're
scene,
missing a huge...
You're missing, the actual conclusion of the movie, the actual payoff to Mysterio, because he's the one who set this in motion.
Yeah.
And maybe the only time, they also don't really do cliffhangers in MCU except for Infinity War. They do cool setups, oh, this character's coming.
Right.
But this feels like much more of a direct cliffhanger, especially for a solo movie. I don't think we've ever had one on this caliber,
No, because it's, and I would love to go into the back room and see who... Was this more of a Sony idea or a Marvel idea? The sense of we have to set things up big time for the sequel,
right?
But I think it was not done in a way that is cheap.
No,
it's intriguing.
No, it's very intriguing. The only thing that always amuses me is I guarantee, and sometimes I think they've even openly talked about this, about how much they must debate. Is this a post-credit scene versus just the end of the movie? Because there are a couple of times where I've thought that was going to be a post-credit scene. Tony Stark at the end of Incredible Hulk, it just feels, right? That would have been post-credit. And even the end of Captain America, which is more extended with him waking up in the present, the way it ends with him, with the kid running around in World War II, that's the cut to credits.
Right.
But they decided at a certain point
to keep going.
Yeah, because this one's really direct because it literally picks up the same scene. It's they're swinging together. So they probably had edits where they went back and forth on that, but it doesn't feel cheap to me because it just feels like such an exciting after thing.
And I think part of it might be, we've talked about Spider-Man, there are certain themes in our non-spoiler review. Like there are certain themes that they've explored before that I find fresh in this iteration of Spider-Man because they tie it so directly to this version of the character and not just a more broad theme of responsibility, but really digging in deep to this Spider-Man. But what I like about how they've changed it here, why it doesn't just feel like a cheap cliffhanger, is we have dealt in almost every Spider-Man movie thus far with the idea of I want to live even in this one, I want to live a normal life, but I'm Spider-Man.
Right.
So what is that sacrifice that I have to make? What do I have to give up for that? Do I have to give up Mary Jane? Do I have to hide it from my aunt? Do I have to do I go to London? But I can't go to London with Gwen Stacy because I'm Spider-Man. I'm very intrigued by the idea of I'm Spider-Man, but the world knows that I'm Spider-Man, and I have to deal with that. And I'm trying to think if there is how many other characters even have that element of a secret identity. Has it ever been established that people know that T'Challa is the Black Panther, or I
think so. I mean, again, it's like he was taken into custody in Civil War, so clearly the U.S. government knows.
Right.
I don't think it's a secret, but then again, they don't until the end of the Black Panther movie. They're not supposed to know that Wakanda is this high tech.
Right.
Yeah. So who do they think was even part of that? Civil War stuff.
But I mean, the idea of like people know who Thor is. They know that Captain America was Steve Rogers. They know that Iron Man was Tony Stark. They now know who Black Widow is.
Yeah.
I do like that they're breaking out of this convention of just there's no secrecy anymore, and it's just about dealing with being a hero.
Yeah. And in the comics, it's funny because there were other stories where he was outed as Spider-Man or revealed he was Spider-Man in a weird stupor that would be dealt with very quickly. The one big time it wasn't was actually the comic book Civil War story where he was like, I am Spider-Man in the world, which we won't get into how they eventually solved that. But for a while, it was more like, okay, what's his life going to be like now that everyone knows that? And this is the first time, the movies can really deal with that. You know, that, like, what will this mean? I mean, it's two things, because he's also wanted as a criminal, but even if that was put aside, it's like, what will this mean for Aunt May and his friends and his relationship with MJ and all that stuff? Yeah.
Well, let's move on to the twist that when we were reviewing the movie, was the hardest to not reference because, listen, if you know the Spider-Man comics, you know who Mysterio is, and you know what he does.
Right.
You know that he's a master of illusion, so it wasn't that hard to suppose that Jake Gyllenhaal was not who he presented himself to be, and in fact, Quentin Beck was revealed to be.
Yeah.
I like the idea that they kept it a little bit in that special effects artist mode, but what I didn't see coming, and what I liked, and I wonder how divisive it's going to be, and I know that people say that they've gone to this well many times, but the idea that this was a Tony Stark related grudge, as so often seems to happen. But I like that this wasn't just a random act of whatever, that once again, Tony Stark continues to wreak havoc wherever he goes. Yeah,
I can see both sides of it in that, there's something cool in the comics about, and something you could do in the modern era, very interesting about if he was literally some sort of Hollywood ILM special effects guy who, for whatever reason, decided to turn to crime. On the other hand, for this movie, it's like, yes, the MCU has been very Iron Man-centric, but this movie kind of had to deal with the aftermath of his death, both for the universe at large, but also for Peter's personal story. So I think it made story economy, it made a lot of sense the way they tied it all together, and I don't mind it.
I will say the scene of Jake Gyllenhaal standing on the bar and revealing his master plan in the hands of a different actor could have been a movie derailing scene in the sense that it would have just seemed too pat and too easy and too sudden and too obvious. But I think the combination of the fact that Jake Gyllenhaal really, I think, was great in that role. He goes for it. But I also loved how they were not afraid to also embrace the humor of the fact that these flashing back to previous films and showing them in these different situations.
That is what really nailed it for me, because I was very amused by the putting him into Civil War, and that the barf thing was his idea and he hated the name. That was really funny. But bringing back that character from Iron Man 1, who is played by Peter Billingsley, the kid from A Christmas Story.
Good friends with Jon Favreau.
Good friends. That's why he's in Iron Man 1, because he's good friends with Jon Favreau and Vince Vaughn, and he's co-produced and been involved in a lot of those guys' movies. So the fact that he had this little role in Iron Man 1 11 years ago when the MCU began, And when they showed that flashback, I was like, are you kidding me? And I even forgot it was Billingsley at first, just the fact that they would have found that actor at all.
I didn't realize it was till afterwards. Oh, I just thought it was some like really lucky guy who got a call 10 years after. It's just like, hey, remember when Jeff Bridges yelled at you a decade ago? We want you to come back.
We want you to come back. What a great deep cut, though. That is what helped that. Yeah, like you said, that scene is a tough scene. It could have really thrown the movie off the rails because it's just exposition dump.
Yeah.
We're kind of going to make a big veer here that could get just ridiculous, but they were winking enough with it. They had enough fun with it. They had the right actor delivering it. And then, tying in the past the way they did, I thought that was very, very smart.
Do you think it was too obvious? I mean, do you think that it would have been like an I think Roth called it an anti-Mandarin, where you're expecting him to be the villain and he turns out not to be? Or was this just... They want to use Mysterio, and you just have to understand that if you know the comics, you may not be as surprised by this twist as other people would be.
It's so difficult for me here because I really wonder. It's like, because the fact is, of course, is that most people go to see these movies and never read the comics.
Yeah.
So I really wonder, for us, it's like, okay, the second they say Mysterio is the movie, oh, he's the bad guy, and then you see the trailer and he's the good guy, you're like, oh, so he's pretending to be the good guy.
Right.
But you feel like most people wouldn't know that. Now, I don't know, maybe their friends are telling them, like, oh, in the comics, he's a bad guy, or setting them up.
Yeah.
But the only other time, the only comparison I can think of is the Winter Soldier, which was like predicated on a reveal that if you read the comics,
you knew.
Yeah, you knew what it was going in. But it still didn't matter. It's not like I'm like, oh, they shouldn't have made Bucky the Winter Soldier. Ultimately, you want... It was the right thing to do, even if people get to say, like, I could see that coming. Oh, yeah, we all could if we read the comics. That's okay. And I think that, like I said, I love the second half so much. I like the first half, but I love the second half. And that's completely predicated on, okay, now Mysterio is the villain, and now we can really show what Mysterio can do.
That was my favorite part.
Yep.
And I think that's what, for me, any doubts that I might have had about staying on the course with him, and it's like it's just
right.
When he's giving him those glasses, you're like, you idiot.
Oh yeah. Like, I had people next to me like, no.
But what they did with the design elements, that to me was one of the most, if not the most, comic booky sequences I've ever seen successfully realized in a film, in the sense of there's a reason for it to look the way that it does, and they pull it off. I loved that, particularly the sequence where he's in the warehouse and he just
changing
keeps changing the costumes, and I love that. Was maybe my favorite sequence in the film.
I completely agree. It's so great, and as someone who's been reading Spider-Man comics pretty much my whole life, it really felt like, wow, that is what I remember as a kid brought to life in front of me. Like those trippy sequences of Mysterio appearing as a giant or making him see strange things.
Yeah.
It just was such a great translation of something that from the comics in a way that, you can pull off with modern effects. I really loved, seeing that actually come to life.
Now, the big thing is we have Michael Keaton's Vulture is still alive. I think it's safe to say that this Spider-Man, the standalone films are big time 2 for 2 on villains, in the sense that, like, 2 successful villains that were tied into their comic origins, but allowed to go in a different way. The difference being it would appear. But the movie does kind of go out of its way to confirm that Mysterio now, despite his legacy living on in the sense of framing Peter Parker, dead. Yeah. Disappointing to you that they are not building a roster of surviving villains, or... Yeah,
it was a thing that became kind of a frustration, I think, for a lot of comic book fans, myself included, with comic book movies in general in the early days, which is to say the 90s and the early 2000s, is they'd always kill the villain. The Batman movies did it left and right, and the Spider-Man movies did it. It's like one and done, It's like he's in and he's out. Part of me was a little sad to see him go, but I think that they'd earned it, both A, by the Vulture surviving the last movie, so it didn't feel like, oh, they're just going to kill every villain, and B, because his death leads into such a significant ending.
Yes.
Because it's his legacy will live on in, we presume, the next Spider-Man movie. Is going to be, everything is going to be predicated on the fact that Mysterio did this, framed him, and revealed his identity in one fell swoop with the help of Peter Billingsley, who did survive to help release that video, that doctored video.
Yeah.
So while I would have liked to see the character survive, I didn't feel like pissed off in a way I think I might have if it felt like, oh, they're just killing the villains again left and right.
And it's tech.
Yeah.
So it's not outside the realm of possibility that you get another actor to come in and now they are Mysterio.
Yes, or that you see Jake Gyllenhaal in some form again. There's a lot of ways that they could work with that. You know, I could, and hell, I mean, the fact that I think people are going to really respond to, like we said, the Mysterio stuff in this movie, while they can't just do it over and over again, I feel like they might figure out a way to have it incorporated in some form.
So, Endgame. Yeah, they literally from the first, post the cold open, Mexico opening of the movie. Literally from the first frame, we start dealing with the consequences of Endgame. Yeah. I was a little spotty at the beginning because I was like, I'm not ready to laugh necessarily
it's an interesting swerve,
these
right?
things, at these deaths quite yet.
Yeah.
But it also is in the context of I've seen plenty of videos on YouTube to know that that is what a high schooler often is capable of when putting together a tribute video of that sort. I did like the picture of Vision that was like super grainy and you could tell they just zoomed in on
and the Getty images with the logo.
Yes.
Oh man.
But from the jump, we are dealing with what now they appear now to have called it the blip.
Yeah, the blip
seems to be canonically now.
Yes.
Which is okay.
And it also makes sense because how many people knew that it was caused by a snap?
Right.
Like that would not be information that would be readily available to everyone.
But it shows us a couple things, which is that really the terror. It was with the terror and the comedy of it.
Yeah.
I thought that it was to see the angle, as brief as it was, of the initial snap from the high school assembly, and the idea of like this is what it looked like. It's just people just disappeared. Just gone. But the comedy being we saw now also apparently what the visual was like when they came back, which is that they just corporeated into the existing
got a basketball
space.
To the head.
There are a lot of there are a lot of questions that raises about like what is somebody, but that's just that's you have to concede those things, I think.
Yeah, it was a very tricky thing this movie had to do, and I think they were more successful than not because yes, there is part of me that's like, wow, this is such a weighty thing that they need to deal with this in an emotional, deep way. But I also get when I talk to John Watts about it, it's like they didn't want to make a 2-hour movie that was just about depression. You know, it's just a Spider-Man movie, right? Like that's it's not really the right place for it. But then timing-wise, they have to deal with it. So I think that it was a hard line for them to do. Like you said, it's like it was weird to suddenly swerve into a comedy aspect of it, but it was very well done, because yes, that is what a high school tribute video might look like. It's made with sincerity by the characters, but there's something inherently funny about the execution of it. I think that they did a good job of kind of going through questions we had and addressing them without fully going into them, whether it be the people disappearing and coming back, or the fact that it turns out that benefit that we saw in the trailers with Ant-Man and Spider-Man is for not just homeless people, for homeless people that were displaced by the blip. Right. Because they come back and their home is not their home anymore. Again, this movie does not then spend a half hour discussing this issue, but it acknowledges it is an issue. So
much like the idea of you're now classmates with somebody who was 5 years younger than you when you left. Or the little thing that I liked was the idea of Flash Thompson using his ID, which says that he was born.
That's true, right?
21, but that he was gone for 5 years, so he's not really that drinking age. Yeah, little things like that you're like, oh yeah, I guess these would be issues that you would have to confront.
Right, and it's like it's one of those things. Again, the MCU is so vast at this point, and now they have not only multiple movies a year, but now we know they have Disney Plus shows coming. So my hope is that there might be time somewhere else, maybe in a Disney Plus series, to deal with a lot of these things in a more serious way. But I'm glad this movie acknowledged them, so we know they're not ignoring that these things happened and that there would be ramifications. It's not what the movie is about on that level. It's more about the aftermath of Iron Man's death, as far as like what is this movie dealing with. But yeah, it was good to see the mentions there. It was very interesting to see that strange. I'm sure they had so many conversations about the tone of this movie.
And you mentioned Tony Stark looms very large over. I liked Edith, even in Death I'm the Hero, which is the very Tony Stark thing to do. Even Dead I'm the Hero.
Hysterical line. Isn't Edith also Hawkeye's mom's name is revealed in Endgame? So suddenly that name is like all over the.
I don't know,
but
that's very possible.
I believe the Red Skull says Hawkeye or Clint, daughter of Edith.
Oh, okay, interesting. I have to go back.
Yeah,
I haven't committed the movie to memory, so I'll have to.
And I think that's just a coincidence, by the way. Kind of like how Civil War had homecoming as one of the words in Bucky's
that's
trigger.
true. Yeah.
And they had to be like, no, guys, it's not.
Can't do that. Yeah.
It's just different people writing these movies, and sometimes they're going to put the same thing
But
in.
we see Tony literally looking over, and I kind of liked how that wasn't, I didn't think it was too overdone, except for in the one shot that literally shows Spider-Man looking at this huge mural of Iron Man. But the idea that everywhere they went, somewhere there was a huge tribute to Tony Stark, that he was literally looming over the world.
Right.
And I thought that played in very well with this idea that Peter feels this pressure now, that he's been anointed as the new leader of the Avengers, and he's not ready for that.
Yeah, I like that a lot too, because it's both simple and highly effective. Yeah, it's like he's trying to escape, he's trying to get away from it all. And then he just can't, because this person was so significant that there's just going to be monuments and shrines to him everywhere he goes.
Yeah.
And that's a simple idea that is done very well in the movie. You walk around every corner and there's some sort of shrine has been put up to Tony. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Just some housekeeping, some little things. I was openly not a fan of Zendaya in the last Spider-Man movie.
I heard you say that. I disagreed.
I just felt like she's very one note. And not Zendaya necessarly, the character.
The MJ character.
I felt I liked a lot more how they did her in this movie, is in the sense of they expanded on it in a way that they didn't in the first film, in the sense of like she acts a certain way, but you understand why she acts that way. And I think that's what was missing. The first movie, to me, it felt like they were just writing her as just like a spunky teen, I don't like anything. Whereas this movie, I think they delved deeper into it. I liked the character better. I liked the performance more, because I thought that she was given more to do.
Right.
And now we're set up with Peter and MJ. They're together.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
Yeah, I really liked the dynamic. I think they have great chemistry. I guess I liked her more in the first one because, I mean, you're right. She was more one note in the first one, but I felt like by design, because in the first one he's got his crush on Liz, and so this is just this sarcastic girl to the side that until the end is not significant. But in this one, yes, of course, they did a great job of kind of giving her a lot more layers, sort of seeing behind the sarcasm, I thought. And because I guess in the first one I just thought she was very funny. Yeah. But in this one she gets to do more than that. And I actually ended up really liking that she found out his secret identity in this one, especially because of the end. Because if she didn't already know, I think it would have been almost like too much, or would have made it feel less consequential. Like if she finds out with everyone else.
Right.
But by having her already in on it and sort of become like a much more trusted person in his life, I think that's a good idea, and just helps with the next movie that he has her to turn to as well.
Yeah. The scattered thoughts. I thought that my favorite joke in the movie might be the Happy Hogan attempting to throw a shield like Captain America and failing dismally.
That was great.
I think that is the advantage of being 24 movies deep now into a thing, is that you can have a really effective throwaway joke like that you don't have to set up, that you just know who Cap is, so you can just have that be you can just have that be a 15-second thing. I think that might be my favorite joke in the movie, and it's a total throwaway.
That was a great joke, and it's also again, they have such a deep well of characters. It's very funny because Happy Hogan on one hand is like, just sort of great utility player they can bring in. It's also so strange because Jon Favreau created the entire MCU, so it's kind of funny that he's like still there on call while he's, not only did he create this whole thing, but he's off directing Lion King and has this giant career as a director. But I liked seeing him here. It was fun to have him be that connective tissue to Homecoming and to that part of the MCU.
Yeah, I thought that many of us have argued like, oh, when are they going to dig up the corpse of Tony Stark again? And the fact that I'm sure it wasn't meant as this, but the fact that they actually have a joke where the exhumed corpse of Tony Stark. Spider-Man
that was kind of freaky. Actually,
that was very freaky.
Yeah. Marvel Zombies, if they ever did it as an actual
I think maybe that was a test run for Marvel Zombies. They just wanted to see how people responded.
Right.
But that just played into how effective I thought those sequences of the illusions, Michael, were versus reality.
Yeah.
And I thought that the way that they set that up of going inside in the drones, and it allowed Spider-Man to do. They played with it a little bit, the idea that when you put Spider-Man up against a 70-foot tall monster, like what can he do? Shoot his webs at it and kick it? It's like he's got to sort of do small things around it. But I like that they were able to have the big grand scale battle. But make it in a way so that his powers were actually effective.
Yeah. It's funny because to me, it's like the actual final battle is just okay, and maybe that's because it does turn into Spider-Man like punching a lot of drones a little bit, but that's okay because the Mysterio stuff beforehand was so effective as far as like the large-scale illusions. And then, as we've talked about, what he does in the aftermath is so effective that I was okay with, like, okay, Spider-Man's got to destroy a bunch of robots here for a second.
Plus, I like that it was leaning into this idea of, and the Spider-Man comics have done this forever as well, is that he has to customize. He's very strong, but he does not have the most wide-ranging power skill set, and so he has to customize his own suit and everything to fit the challenge that he's facing. And that's the whole Tony Stark sequence where he's figuring out. And so I felt like that was as much the point as the action was the point.
Yeah.
Although I still enjoyed, the action as well.
Two things you just reminded me, by the way, when you mentioned the AC/DC earlier, that was a very funny joke about Love Led Zeppelin. Also, it actually helped me because one little complaint I had about Endgame was, they should have played some AC/DC as Tony's last movie. I actually thought when he drove up to Avengers headquarters with the shield, should have been playing some AC/DC. They didn't, but then when they played it here, I was like, oh, there we get our symmetry, you know? And then also with the ending being the 1-2 punch of a bunch of drones and the return of J. Jonah Jameson, it's like, maybe they can actually do the Spider Slayers.
Oh,
I felt like this Jonah, because you couldn't have really done that before.
He's a little too cartoonish.
Yeah, but this Jonah with this tech and this world, you can get to the Spider Slayers, I think.
Any other random notes and bits that you want to point out?
I wish they would give Maria Hill something more to do, even fake Maria Hill, as it turned out, just because I really like Kobe Smulders. She's been in a bunch of these movies, but I couldn't tell you much about the character's personality.
She's on a screen.
Yeah, she's there. She helped save Nick/Talos at one point, so that was nice.
With the bazooka. That was nice.
Because she probably had more screen time here than in almost any movie.
She did.
But she didn't really give her anything to do, so
I think it's going to be, whenever I see this for a second time, I am going to be very curious to watch their dynamic and really Fury's, because the whole time watching Fury, I was like, okay, this is an interesting Nick Fury, but it seems more informed by the Nick Fury that I know from Captain Marvel than the one from the recent MCU. But now, maybe that makes a little more sense.
I'm so glad you brought up the Kree sleeper cells line, because I hadn't thought about it. I remember the line after the movie, but I hadn't thought about it in context of who is really talking at that point. Because now it means like, could that be sleeper cells on another planet? Like, it's like there's just a lot more significance to those two characters tracking Kree sleeper cells. So like you, when I see it again, I think I'll be like watching these two characters a lot more, and maybe I will find more to Maria Hill if I know it's really Talos' wife, whose name I forget. I'm sorry.
Yes. Well, I'm sure there are many more spoiler things that you want to talk about. Please feel free to do so in the comments below. Let us know what you thought of the movie. What did you like? What did you not like? Do you still have questions? Are you excited about the future? Are you angry first about something?
Something, but I hope not.
Let us know. And Eric, you've got a couple of stories that are going to be up soon on fandom.com.
Yeah, a couple are up now, which is some interview with John Watts and an interview with Jacob Batalon running into the movie. I hope I'm saying your last name right, Jacob. But then I have some more content with Mr. Watts that will be running on Sunday the 7th, where we delve into some of these spoiler topics and some of the things about the ending. Some of the things we're just talking about, I asked him some questions about.
Yeah, so awesome. So check those out on fandom.com. And of course, we got a shout out to a friend of the show, Tony Revolori. Great job, Tony.
Yes.
We love you.
And he had a little thing there with no one to pick him up.
Moment of pathos.
We're setting up, because in the comics, of course, Flash gets some redemption. So I think, set the table
poor
for that
Flash.
Poor Flash.
Only a chauffeur to greet him.
Oh, and what will he think? There'll be a lot of ramifications for how he reacts.
Because he idolizes Spider-Man, and now he finds out that
it's Penis Parker.
Dickwad Penis Parker is Spider-Man.
That's right.
That could be interesting. So many questions to explore, both in this movie and going forward. We hope you liked our spoiler review of Spider-Man Far From Home. Please stay tuned here to Fandom Entertainment. We'll bring you the latest reviews, news, and everything else coming out this summer and beyond. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.